This is Editorial from Pulse of Africa, the voice and face of Africa.
Much of current tensions that arose between and among nations far and near in relation to apparent ownership and the right of unfettered access to the sea in Africa found its genesis in the checkered history brought about by centuries of colonialism. A deeper look into this incendiary topic highlights the fact that slavery and colonialism pitted coastal and hinterland populations against each other by creating economic incentives for conflict using existing power structures and disrupting traditional trade networks. Coastal groups acting as a middleman for European traders became intermediaries who supplied captives from the interior, often using warfare or raiding to acquire them, while the interland population suffered the consequences. Colonialism later solidified these divisions, establishing artificial boundaries and economic structures that favored coastal elites who profited from resource extraction, further alienating them from inland communities and creating a legacy of tension and resentment. How colonialism deepened the divide is an interesting fact to brood over to get a clearer understanding of the ways current relationships along the Red Sea have come into play. Benefiting coastal elites, colonial powers often propped up coastal leaders who were willing to collaborate in exchange for wealth and power. This created a new class of coastal elites whose wealth was built on the exploitation of both their own people in the interior and the resources of the land. Resource extraction and artificial boundaries. Colonial economies were built for the extraction of raw materials, benefiting the colonizers and coastal trading hubs. They drew artificial borders that often split communities, but still relied on the interior for labor and resources, further entrenching the exploitative relationship between the coast and the hinterland. Legacy of equality. The colonial system left behind a legacy of inequality and resentment, where coastal regions often held political and economic advantage over their hinterland counterparts, perpetuating the divisions that slavery and colonialism had created. The Red Sea, the world's most important strategic waterways, linking the Mediterranean Sea to the Indian Ocean through the Suez Canal and Bab el-Mandeb Strait, is no different from the rest of Africa in terms of the ways colonialism resulted in continued fragmentations of the African societies. These tensions spiraled into modern times as more and more foreign players joined old players in the region's geopolitics, marked by dynamisms of alignment among them. Big powers set up camp on the Red Sea in their bids to expand their respective sphere of influence across Eastern and Northern Africa, as well as the Middle East. Such expansions have been matched by countries in the region aligning with big powers and creating their own axis. As such, the Red Sea has for long been a theater for power plays between and among countries in the region, as well as foreign powers. Their objectives either geopolitical power and influence or the control of one of the world's busiest maritime straits. As nearly 10% of global trade passes through this corridor, major actors such as the US, China, Russia, and European states, alongside regional powers like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Turkey, have expanded their political, economic, and military presence. Gulf states have invested heavily in ports and bases across the Horn of Africa, while China established its first overseas military base in Djibouti. Simultaneously, Turkey and Qatar have strengthened ties with Somalia and Sudan, highlighting how global ambitions intersect with regional rivalries. For the Horn of Africa, this renewed competition offers both opportunities and risks. Foreign investments in infrastructure and trade corridors promise economic growth, yet the proliferation of military bases and competing alliances have deepened internal divisions and weakened regional sovereignty. Dependence on external powers has limited policy autonomy, while Gulf rivalries and great power competitions have spilled into local politics, aggravating instability in states like Somalia and Sudan. Ultimately, without coordinated regional governance and balanced diplomacy, the Horn risks becoming a fragmented battleground for external interests rather than a unified hub of maritime and economic cooperation. The Red Sea Corridor and the Horn of Africa are inseparable in modern geopolitics. While heightened foreign engagements brings opportunities, infrastructure investment, trade linkage also creates dependency, strategic vulnerability, and contestations. Ultimately, the degree to which horn states can assert their own policy choices, coordinate regionally, and manage external involvement, will shape whether this era of scramble results in beneficial integration or deepened instability. As of late, countries in the Eastern Africa region that have been rendered landlocked are beginning to be demanding for fairness and justice in current systems and relationships that determine access to the sea and military of commercial use of the sea or both. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni recently warned of potential future wars in East Africa over landlocked countries' access to the Indian Ocean. Museveni suggested it was wrong for any country in the region to claim exclusive ownership of the sea. By being audacious in bringing the issue up to the international attention, Museveni was suggesting also that his country's economy was growing and the population expanding, making it needful for his country to have a share of the maritime cake provided by the vast Indian Ocean coast bordering the region of East Africa. Ethiopia, the most populous country by far in the region, feels, and rightly so, shady deals during the country's political transition more than 30 years ago robbed it of its most vital access to the Red Sea. Ethiopia has woken up to the urgent need for Red Sea access, framing the issue as legal, historical, and existential necessity for the Horn of Africa nation of more than 135 million people. Ethiopia, therefore, is exploring all diplomatic and legal channels for unfettered access to the sea, and the international legal frameworks back its rights. But international frameworks, such as that provided by the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, have barely been adhered to by so-called coastal states, often denying landlocked states fair access to the sea for whimsical political reasons. All relations between and among nations revolving around ownership and use of the Red Sea must involve influential and pivot countries in the East Africa. The issue of access to the sea can no longer remain swept under the carpet. Sea access demands cannot continue to be the white elephant in the room. The legitimate right to the Red Sea by landlocked countries in the region need to be addressed once and for all. Protectionism, as expressed by few countries that are littoral to the Red Sea to the exclusion of big geopolitical players in the region, will not bring the desired integration, cooperation, and stability in the region.
This is Editorial from Pulse of Africa, the voice and face of Africa.